Hello, everyone. My name is Bob Kahle from Kahle Strategic Insights, and I'm here with my colleague, Gloria Roderick, to talk about a survey project that we did with the Lowcountry Food Bank. In terms of this project, I'm going to go through some background materials, some background information for you. I'll state the objectives, talk a little bit about the methods we used and the sample, and how we collected the data. Then we'll go to reporting out, and Gloria is going to talk about the sample profile first, and then some issues regarding food security. I'll pick it up with COVID-19 and hunger, and then summarize with implications and considerations. In regard to planning, in regard to background, I was fortunate to be involved with the strategic planning for the Lowcountry Food Bank in 2018. Two key issues came up repeatedly from both staff and board, and one is equity, more specifically the equitable distribution of food through the 10-county service area of the Lowcountry Food Bank. And then a second key theme was to become more data-driven in regard to the way that decisions are made within the food bank. Of course, we all recall that in March of 2020, COVID-19 hits the United States and South Carolina specifically. Feeding America grant award was made in August of 2020 for the Lowcountry Food Bank to focus on equity and assessment, and that the initial phase of the project would focus on the 7 coastal counties, and then the second phase would focus on Charleston and the Tri-County area. In terms of the objectives of the project, we were really set out to collect data from Lowcountry Food Bank clients in the era of COVID-19 across all 10 counties in the Lowcountry service area. We also wanted to get information from walk-ins at the Lowcountry Food Bank. We're most interested in finding out demographic information, including the number of households with children and seniors. We wanted to learn a bit about the percentage of users who get SNAP, or the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, commonly known as food stamps. We use the USDA scale on food insecurity. We report those numbers out. We assess the risk of serious illness from COVID-19 and its relationship to food security. And we also wanted to understand how many of the clients that were in these drive-through distributions were first-time recipients of free food after the start of the pandemic on March 1st of 2020. We also didn't want to interfere or slow down food distribution, so we didn't want to cause any problems. In terms of the method, the survey was customized. The survey was customized from the Feeding America client survey after we did a pretest and revisions. And we also revised it again after phase 1. The data were collected via interviewer-administered surveys. So these were done on iPads or on Chromebooks with an interviewer standing outside of the vehicle while the respondent was still in the vehicle, typically the driver. So about 30 questions, less than 10 minutes, and we did substantially shorten a lot of the lead-ins and transitions from what was originally scripted in the Feeding America client survey. We used the Qualtrics offline app. This was an app that allowed us to collect the data and have it be stored on the device itself rather than needing an internet or cellular connection. We learned to collect the data while the clients were in line waiting, that worked very productively for us. A $10 gift card was given to the respondent as a thank you once the interview was done. This was a gift card to the grocery store chain that was closest to the location of where we did the interviewing. Typically, it was either a Food Lion or a Harris Teeter. 84% of all the surveys were collected by the research team. I did 321 of them, or 45% of the total. Gloria, who'll be up here in just a minute, did about 25% of the total. And then a graduate student at that time Charlton Brownell did about 100, or about 14% of the total. Here's what the phase one data looks like. In total, we had 373 surveys collected in phase one. You can see the distribution across the various counties, with the lowest being Beaufort and the highest being Horry. We did 2 sites in each of the 7 counties. 4 of these were agency partner-led distributions, and all 10 were direct-to-client distributions. 20 to 30 completes per site on average. In addition, 64 surveys were collected from walk-ins at the Lowcountry Food Bank. For this phase one, data were collected between October 7th of 2020 and right before Christmas, December 22nd of 2020. In phase two, we had 5 sites in Charleston County, 3 direct-to-client and 2 agency partner, 2 sites in each of Dorchester and Berkeley, and 248 total completes, with a high of 40 per site to a low of 10, an average of about 35 completes per site. The phase 2 data were collected from February 17th through April 19th, 2021. So this is what it looks like in total here. 721 in total, 373 from the outside the Tri-County, 348 in the Tri-County, and with the single largest county being Charleston, as it is the most populous county in the 10-county service area. The number of completed surveys by distribution type and research phase is shown here. Again, you can see the breakout of agency partner-led distributions, about 243, to direct-to-client 414, and then the 64 walk-ins. All right, well, that's the part one. Now I'd like to turn it to my colleague, Gloria Roderick, for talking about the sample profile. Gloria, please.
Hi. So we'll talk through the sample profile that made up all of those that were surveyed. First, we have the survey locations by distribution type, indicated by agency partner or a direct-to-client distribution. As you can see from the map, it was well spread out over the 10-county service area, with approximately 2 sites per county surveyed. Next, we have the percent of households with children and seniors by county. So here we see that in Dorchester County, we see a majority of households at 65% having seniors in the home, but the lowest amount of children in the home at only 32.8%. In Charleston County, we see the highest number of children in the home at 58%. So we see a little bit of a range within the outside the Tri-County area and the Tri-County area, especially with having children in the home more predominantly in the Tri-County area. The monthly household income by region is displayed here. So you can see we see a large difference between outside the Tri-County and inside the Tri-County in that $501 to $1,000, which was a very common household income type in the total range of 24.8%. But we also see the predominant most common income level was between $1,000 and $2,000 for most households. A lot of the smaller income levels we saw in the rural county areas, where it was very predominant that it was a Social Security income and they knew down to the dollar exactly what that amount was, and they're living on that fixed income permanently. Next slide, we do see that by community types. So we have urban, rural, exurban, and our total. Exurban is defined by us as being just on the outskirts of an urban area, but not defined as rural. So we'll see that they have access to different goods and services close by, but not exactly in the rural area. Urban is defined as your downtown Charleston or central located Horry County area. So here we see that within the exurban area, we see the highest amount of less than $500 of income, and the second highest being in the urban, as showing the least income for these areas. Next slide, we have income sources by community type. So here we can see where that Social Security versus full-time employment, unemployment compensation, or disability benefits are making up income for the household. What's interesting is in the total category, we see that about 1/3 of those surveyed were on disability benefits, which struck us as a very high number, and also at 62% receiving Social Security. So large majority of those surveyed are on some sort of either government assistance or Social Security benefit. So we looked at multi-generational homes, which was having more than one individual in the home from a different generation. So we asked individuals if there was anyone under the age of 18 in the home, if there was anyone ages 18 to 64, and then above 64 to get this number. And then the single generation is either just somebody in the home in one single generation. So we see 80% of those surveyed were in a single generation household, but 13.7% being in a multi-generational household. A lot of times this consisted of a grandparent taking care of a grandchild, or just those with a parent and child relationship in the home. Next, we'll move on to food security data. This is one of the signs we saw at one of our surveyed locations where it was a definite need in the community to have these guidelines there, as they were used to having people come to the food line and not have enough food to give out. So they were trying to prevent some conflict within that. And so we saw these signs at a couple of our different locations. So this is the food security total for all sites. This is based on the USDA scale and their 6-panel questions. So we see that of those surveyed, 27.5% ranked in the very low food insecure level, and another 42.7% in the low category. So we break out this food security by the distribution type, looking at the total distribution sites by agency partner, direct to client, or the walk-ins. Here we see that of the Lowcountry Food Bank walk-ins, we see the highest level of food insecurity at 43.8%, showing a stark difference to any other food distribution type. Next, we broke out the food security by county. And here we see that the most food insecure counties are Williamsburg, Horry, and Georgetown. And the least food insecure rank as the 3 counties within the Tri-County area, Charleston, Berkeley, and Dorchester County. Now there's one question in the USDA food insecurity questions that really struck us that we wanted to break out of that scale. And the question is, in the last 12 months, were you ever hungry but did not eat? So this was a very emotional question to ask, a very difficult one that got a lot of emotional responses. And here we see that of those surveyed, 35.7% in Williamsburg responded that yes, they were hungry and at some point did not eat. Interesting in this, we do see that Charleston does move up in the category here. Recall in the last slide, they were in the bottom 3. Now they've moved up to the top 4. 25% of those surveyed in Charleston were hungry in the last 12 months and did not eat at all. So here we see that same food security broken out by distribution frequency. This is the number of times approximately that the Lowcountry Food Bank has distributed food at that site. So we have the first time, as in it was the very first time that a food distribution was done at that site, and we were surveying at it. Moderate is that they've been a partner for a little bit, and long time is that they're a longstanding partner with the Lowcountry Food Bank. Here we do see that 32.8% of those receiving food and surveyed at a first-time location had a very low food insecurity rate, outranking all other distribution frequency types. Again, back to this one particular question in the USDA questions of the question, were you ever hungry but did not eat at all? Here we see this broken out by when there are all three generations represented in the home versus a single generation. What we found was that 27.3% answered yes, they were hungry and did not eat at all when there were children present in the home. Typically, we heard stories of grandparent or parent sacrificing food to give to the children in the home and going without for themselves. So we see a large need in households that do contain all three generations. We're moving to some SNAP benefit data. This is the percent of households receiving SNAP benefits. Here we see a much larger number in the outside the Tri-County area at 25.2% than we see in the Tri-County at only 19.5%. These are still very low numbers for those that are likely eligible to receive SNAP benefits. And we get into some of that in the next slide. So we asked respondents the reason for not receiving SNAP benefits. And this kind of became a conversation with our interviewees, and we found a lot of them had applied for SNAP benefits, but found they were not eligible. Most commonly was that they were $1 or $2 off the low income mark, among some other reasons. We also see Dorchester County, a high rank of 51.9% of individuals who did not think they were eligible and did not have the information to know if they should apply. But most frequently we did hear that someone applied and was not eligible, or they just didn't think they would be eligible. So this question was interesting to ask. After asking about SNAP benefits, we asked how many weeks would SNAP benefits typically last their household? And typically the response to this was a little bit of a chuckle because everyone knew it's not very long. And the data here shows that about 63% in total of survey respondents said it was less than 2 weeks that SNAP benefits were lasting. Here we see in the Tri-County area, about 64.7% said less than 2 weeks, and outside the Tri-County area being a little less at 61%, but really seeing the majority of respondents are saying it's less than 2 weeks, and even some saying in their home it's only 1 week. And interviewees were asked, once the pandemic is controlled, what would their preferred distribution approach be? We asked them if they would prefer a drive-through distribution, choosing food inside of a pantry, or picking up a box inside of the pantry, or no opinion, any option would be fine. And overwhelmingly, we saw in each county that respondents preferred the drive-through distribution method.
Yeah, and if I may add here, Gloria, one of the things that we were a bit surprised at were the number of individuals who had some type of disability, oftentimes had problems with moving around. And when you look at the number of seniors that we have as well, that really for seniors or folks with a disability, the drive-through is quite convenient for them. They don't have to worry about moving the boxes and whatnot. Also applies to parents who have small children in car seats in the car. So at first blush, we were pretty taken aback by these data, but then after you think about it for a while and you see what goes on in the distributions, it does make sense that the drive-through distribution is most convenient for many of them. Although it should be said that when we went into this research, the drive-through distribution approach was developed as a safety measure, so there was no contact between the volunteers or the food bank employees and the clients. But there are other benefits that showed themselves as well. Okay, Gloria, thank you so much for that presentation and all your hard work on this project through design, collection, and analysis. Thanks, Gloria Roderick. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit now about COVID-19 and hunger. First off, sorry, I'm a little too quick with the flipper there. First, we just want to show you this picture to give you a sense of what these distributions look like. So this was at Sacristy Elementary on November 6th, and you can see the lineup of the cars. It's pretty overwhelming when you pull up and you have several hundred cars waiting an hour or even sometimes 2 hours before the distribution is to start. So here's one of the key pieces that we want to show, and this is the question of the first time that they've received free groceries before or after the pandemic, and we break this out by distribution type. So let's look at total first. We got about 5% who say that today, the day that the survey was done, was their first time receiving free groceries, I should say. And this is pretty consistent across all the various distribution types. But if you take a look at the total again, about 49% indicate that the first time was after the start of the pandemic. So these are newly hungry, newly food insecure folks. So if you add that approximately 5% with the 49%, you get 54% of the total individuals who were interviewed on this project whose first need for free groceries came after the start of pandemic. And we see also here is the big difference between the agency partner versus direct to client and the walk-ins, where the walk-ins are by far first time was after the pandemic. So the walk-ins that are being served at the headquarters there of the Lowcountry Food Bank in North Charleston are perhaps in greater need than those in other areas. At least their need is new to them, and they have found the Lowcountry Food Bank to get some food. All right, this is what Gloria alluded to previously, is that we do see these are the newly food insecure now, and that the newly food insecure are more likely to be with children in the home, where seniors in the home, we certainly do see some food security there. Excuse me, on the slide here for just a second. Yeah, there we go, is that the seniors in the home are newly food insecure after the start of the pandemic at a rate a little bit lower than those who have children in the home. All right, so this is the SNAP benefits broken out by the newly food insecure and those who were food insecure before the start of the pandemic. And as you might expect, we get a smaller proportion of the total, about 18% of the newly food insecure who receive SNAP. Some are not aware of it. Some make too much money to qualify. Others just have not been able to submit their application yet. A much higher percentage, 26.8% of those who've been food insecure prior to the start of the pandemic. Here again, we show the breakout by county, and this is the percent of newly food insecure broken out by the 10 counties in total. And as you can see, Horry and is by far has the highest number of newly food insecure. On the other end of the scale, you see Williamsburg and Dorchester. Particularly in Williamsburg, it's not like there isn't a good deal of food insecurity there. It's just that they've been food insecure for a very long time before the start of the pandemic. So you're not seeing, as a proportion of the total, the number of newly food insecure as we see particularly in Horry. Okay, that's a quick run through on the findings. I'm going to try to summarize briefly here in terms of what all of this means to the Lowcountry Food Bank and the agency partners that it works so closely with. So the first one is that there's a wide variation in food insecurity by distribution type. We pointed out that those walk-ins are the most extremely food insecure. We also know that the newly food insecure represents a bit more than half of the total. We're unsure whether the pantry's food provision actually reduces food insecurity or if pantries serve less food insecure households. That's something that we'd like to try to understand more deeply in future research. Horry County households responding to the survey reflect the largest proportion of the newly food insecure, followed by Georgetown and Charleston. And then lastly, understanding the length of time that clients remain food insecure as the pandemic slows will be an essential element for Lowcountry Food Bank planning going forward. Yeah, you know, the poverty observed is really deep and broad, and Gloria went over this when we looked at the income data. Think of it, we've got more than a third of our respondents to the survey that are living on $1,000 a month or less. We didn't show the graph, but it makes sense that the lower the income, the more likely to be food insecure. And we also know that African Americans are disproportionately food insecure and poor. So the big conclusion here, though, is that to shorten the lines, there's got to be provision of food as only one part of the answer. There's got to be some other significant ways to reduce the living expenses of folks who are living in particularly the rural poverty. More than 7 in 10 food assistance recipients surveyed are either in the very low or the low food security segments, and that food security persists across community type, family composition, race, and other characteristics. The effect of the pandemic and the associated economic consequences are likely to persist for the foreseeable future. There's going to be high demand for food assistance, and it should be expected to continue throughout 2021 and beyond. SNAP benefits, relatively small proportion of folks receive SNAP benefits. We need to understand how the barriers to SNAP usage could be overcome, and could easier access to SNAP benefits become a key point of advocacy for the Lowcountry Food Bank. The drive-through is a much preferred approach, like I said earlier, easier for the mobility challenged, seniors, and disabled. Perhaps this could become a mix of a part of the mix of the distribution methods that the Lowcountry Food Bank employs once the pandemic is controlled and beyond. First-time distribution sites are largely working as they serve a high proportion of newly food insecure folks. Sometimes there are logistical problems, and we experience that at some of the first-time sites, but we do emphasize that the Lowcountry Food Bank is reaching a particularly in-need population, and we suggest sticking with these new distribution sites and seek to develop new partnerships that can perhaps offer other services at some of these new sites, like SNAP access, nutrition education, etc. We talk a little bit about the multi-generational families. Certainly they're prone to food insecurity, greatly influenced by the pandemic. And adults in these multi-generational families make choices to not eat so that their kids can. So one of the questions we have is, how can the Lowcountry Food Bank and its agency partners support these multi-generational families? Looking forward, 2020 and 2021 are the most disruptive years in the history of food banking. Demand has skyrocketed while the food supply chain has become unstable and unpredictable. Staying attuned to the changing and very specific needs of the diverse clientele will be essential for the Lowcountry Food Bank, and leveraging fundraising and new food sourcing opportunities during this time is essential as well. The volume of people needing food assistance and the uncertainty of the food supply chain are unlikely to change anytime soon. And with that, we'd like to encourage you to discuss the findings with your colleagues and to seek out answers to any questions you might have. First, go to your food bank representative, and then you can either come directly to Gloria or I, or have your food bank partner reach out to us. On behalf of Gloria Roderick, I'm Bob Kahle from Kahle Strategic Insights, and we thank you for your time and attention and your support of feeding people throughout the Lowcountry Food Bank service area. Thank you.